and welcome to this edition of Potomac Local News. I'm Uriah Kaiser, publisher of PotomacLocalNews.com. Joining us today on the podcast is Lynn Forkel Green. Lynn is running for the Manassas City Council, and she joins us today to talk about her campaign. Ms. Green, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So this is your second bid for office. You ran last year when there was a seat that was vacated by Ken Elston, who left the city and got a new job in North Carolina, if memory serves. And you had 60 days, a very short window, to mount a campaign. It didn't go your way, but now you're coming back and you're still engaged, you're still active, and you still want a seat on that city council. Why?
That's right. Well, nothing has changed in the past year, really. I did have 60 days to run a campaign, and I feel like even though I didn't win, it was successful. I came within 600 votes in such a short amount of time with not everyone knowing who I was. So I do chalk it up to quite a success in a short amount of time. The past several years, I've been very involved. I've gone to almost every meeting I can, work sessions included, community conversations, and I've really become an advocate for our community, primarily with regards to our capital improvement plan and our tax issues. I do think it's really challenging for the average citizen to understand how projects end up on the capital improvement plan, why they stay there when citizens do not want them. Grant Street project to be my top example. And I think people are discouraged when they communicate with the city council and they don't feel heard.
So we'll say the Grant Streetscape Improvement Project, and that is a project that is taking a portion of South Grant Avenue, just south of Old Town Manassas, downtown Manassas, as it's known now, and reducing it from 4 lanes to 2 lanes and adding some turn lanes and some landscaping along there to make it pretty. But some have said, listen, you're essentially taking away lanes of traffic in Northern Virginia. What are you thinking here?
Yeah, exactly. And I did my own research, and I'm just appalled, really, that the citizens of Manassas were already taxed to pay for those roads. Those roads are paid for. And while I can understand from one perspective the utility work that will need to be done, the roads will have to be torn up on one side so that we can manage our, sewage and utility pipes under there. And that's 100% got my support. So please understand, there's 2 parts to this project. The utility work has to be done. We are growing rapidly, and we do not need a situation where our pipes are not updated appropriately. That's a public health matter, and we need to do that. The other $4.5 million, though, is really called a road diet. And what it wants to do essentially is remove 2 lanes, 1 on each side, that has already been paid for by the citizens, and then reduce that flow in the name of safety, which is not going to be more safe. And the same argument was used to expand that part of the road many, many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
if you've been around long enough, like I have, you'll remember that before Prince William Parkway, that was the main sort of gateway into the city. You just come up Route 234 into the city underneath that railroad bridge, because that was the main way in. But now, though that's not sort of the main gateway into the city now, it's still a pretty busy road for anyone who drives on it.
It's very busy, and we still have commuter traffic that's going into the VRE. We have to be mindful that we have projects on the table between Fairfax County, Prince William County, Manassas Park, and Manassas City with regards to Route 28. So why in the world would Manassas City leadership even begin to take away lanes? It makes no sense. And the citizens, especially, I'd just like to point out, Georgetown South, for over a year have asked for this to be tabled. They do not want it. We do not want it.
You mentioned Route 28. We're talking transportation and roads right now. This Route 28 bypass, which essentially is an extension from Godwin Drive, where it meets Sudley Road, and it's extending it for about 2 miles. I guess it's east towards Route 28 and the Fairfax County line. This is a controversial project. It's going to take, if it's built, a $300 million road, if it's built, will take about 54 homes. The road will be built in a floodplain. And many argue that it provides access, direct access for people who live in Western Prince William County, in Bristow, in Fauquier County, and for people who travel up from the south, from Fredericksburg and Stafford counties, direct access to Route 28 in Fairfax without having to go to 66. Now, the Prince William County has flip-flopped on this project. They're the main funders of this, and they're the main jurisdiction that will see that this road is built if it's built, and it looks like it will be. But where do you stand on this $300 million road? By most respects, that's not a cheap price tag, no matter what you're looking at.
It really isn't. But also, for as long as I can remember, and as long as I've been working, and as long as I've been commuting, whether it be to Chantilly, where I was trapped on 28, even if I tried to go down 234 and take back roads, you know, no matter what you do in this area, traffic is a problem. So we have to offer solutions. Because I live in Manassas City, because I'm asking to work on behalf of our city residents, I have to stand on the side of the bypass and not the 28 expansion, because the 28 expansion essentially would go through or end at Old Town, and that doesn't really provide our residents with what it really needs. So
an expansion of Route
I'm
28, as you
trapped.
mentioned,
Yeah.
it's taking the existing 4 lanes of Route 28
Yeah.
and expanding it to 6 lanes, and that would be done in lieu of building the bypass. But you bring
Right.
up a very good point. Downtown Manassas is sort of this bottleneck, right, where you have, and you will have 6 lanes of traffic south of town on Route 28, and eventually you'll have 6 lanes of traffic north of town on the Fairfax County side. But downtown, I don't think there's any plans to widen the road in downtown Manassas.
Well, you really can, or you're getting rid of Old Town downtown, right? That's just where we're at. That's how the city was built, and this is where we are. And we have a significant amount of history we need to protect there. So we do have some challenges with these conversations, and we have to just, you know, do what's best for our residents, and the other jurisdictions will have to work for their residents.
You know, I want to talk about downtown for a minute. You know, I've been covering the city for a long time, and I know that there is a plan to someday eradicate all surface level parking in the city's downtown. That's something that will be, if planners and city officials and business developers have their way, there'll be structured parking downtown, and you'll take a cab or a bus or VRE or some other, you know, hovercraft or whatever we see in the next 20 years to get where we're going. Do you think, though, that the more the city grows, the bigger it gets, the more it's losing its small town charm?
Yes, I think that's one reason why I'm running. You know, I want progress with purpose, and I want balance. And listen, I want a line of people who want to live in Manassas City, because we offer sustainability and we offer balance, and we are not overgrown. And I think that's something a lot of residents would like. I think we're losing a lot of residents because we're too focused on urban development. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't develop, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't progress, because those things are necessary. And I was born and raised here, so I love the changes that have happened. But now, when we're looking long term, we really need to be mindful of what changes we accept and what changes we don't. And I think that really needs to be a community conversation, and not just a community conversation where 3 people show up because they had 7 days notice from the city of Manassas.
So in your mind, what does a future downtown look like? I mean, do you foresee setting building height limits? Do you foresee drawing a sort of a circle on a map maybe and saying we're only going to expand out this wide? You know, when you as an elected leader are asked to provide guidance, what's your vision for the city for the next, in terms of development in the next 20 years?
I do believe in height limits, but listen, I think that there are certain corridors that are more available for conversations where heights are concerned than others. I think the Journal Messenger building, I've been a big opponent of how that building turned out. I'm not against the building itself. The building itself is great, but there could have been, we have some lessons learned from that project, if you will.
And so what that project is, I used to work in that building, and now it is I believe it's a 5-story building. I believe there's retail slated for the first floor, street level retail, and the other 4 floors are condominiums.
And listen, you know, when you talk about parking, that would have been the perfect project to have the underground parking, in my opinion. That should have been the start of that. But my concern is we have this plan for underground parking, but it is so expensive. I do not know if Manassas City will ever be able to see that through.
What about Mathis Avenue? You know, we've had conversations about developing Mathis. You know, it is essentially a series of strip malls. And I've seen plans where it could be redeveloped and those strip malls, those and the largely unused surface parking that makes up those strip malls are actually converted into buildings or other usable space that may be more desirable. Where do you stand? Is that area more ripe for development, do you think, than the traditional downtown?
I do. Listen, Mathis Corridor has been a little neglected. Okay, we've been focused on downtown, Old Town, and we're focused on other neighborhoods. So I think it's time for us to really focus on the Mathis Avenue corridor. But what I think needs to happen is those community conversations, and we need to be very transparent with what's on the table. I would venture to guess most of the neighbors over there don't even know what's on the table. I mean, my aunt has lived there my entire life, and I don't think she even knows.
I want to shift gears on you now and talk about the pandemic and the city's response to it and the recovery. We've seen, earlier this year, we were shocked when the city's unemployment level shot up to 14%. Now it's back down to about 6%. So we're seeing that number fall. But in your estimation, what more needs to happen to make sure that the stories that we've been writing about Manassas, with Micron, the largest public-private partnership in Virginia history, that was a huge windfall for the city. The expansion of Aurora Flight Sciences, which is a division of Boeing at the city airport. Manassas has continued to see these good business stories, but as you recover from the pandemic, what more can the city do to make sure those stories keep coming?
Yeah, that's a great question. And listen, I love that we have the companies that we have here and the organizations that we have here and the opportunities where Manassas City residents can work close to home. That is imperative as we move forward. I think what COVID has also shown us is that, we can't have our eggs in one basket. And we've done a lot to diversify the kind of organizations and companies that are within our city limits. And I think that's one reason why Manassas City is in good shape. When the pandemic first started, I met with some city council members and I started a small business roundtable discussion with our local businesses and especially the restaurants to sort of start those conversations. And from there, you saw the city council approve them to be able to move out into the parking lots and things like that. So those creative solutions are what I'm all about. The next 2 years, we're going to have to continue to be creative. We're going to have to continue to overly communicate. These business owners are stretched thin. Not only do they have to manage their family home, which are probably highly neglected, while they're pivoting to manage their businesses once again and make sure that they're surviving and providing livelihoods for their employees and services for our residents. They have a lot on their plate. And as city elected officials, we need to be making sure that we can offer them as much as possible to make that a little bit easier so they survive these next couple of years.
Everybody's talking about getting children back into school, learning in person, and your daughter, who is a teacher at the city's high school, sounds like she's going to be one of the first cohort of teachers that will return to in-person learning next month, early in November. We know that the city council is separate from the school board. And the Republican candidate for mayor, Teresa Coates Ellis, was asked yesterday about her position on getting children back into school learning in person. And she kind of punted on that. She said, listen, that's a school board thing. We'll let them make the right decision. She's all for safety. But we also know that the school board comes hat in hand to the city council asking for money, right? And so we do know the city council is the funding, a major funding source for the schools. And so as residents look to leadership at the city council level, what's your position on getting students back into school? We understand 65% of parents surveyed in the city wanted their children to return to school at the start of the school year this fall.
Yeah, I'm on the side of family choice. I'm on the side of options. I am on the side of the city council working in tandem with the school board. I do believe Teresa's correct. We have to defer to the school board. They're the ones that are doing the research and they're the ones that are elected to make those particular decisions. So they get 51%, right? When we're talking about final say. However, if you're listening to our residents, which is what I'm all about, they are asking for options. For some families, it is not a good option for their child to go back to school. If they have a situation in their home where it would be unsafe, then they should be able to keep their children remote. For the other families that need to get their kids back to school or their students are suffering during this virtual learning process. If we have teachers that are willing to go back, then I think that we should provide that option. And I definitely think that public school is something that we have taxed our citizens for. So you cannot just stop offering that service. And just calling it a virtual service doesn't fit the bill. But we had to do what we had to do for the safety of our community, for the safety of our employees, and for the safety of our students. And so now I think you're going to see the pivot to start to get those students back in school.
One final thing, I covered you. You did another one of these Zoom calls, these live interviews, and you said that and you said Manassas needs to get the football stands filled again, and it sounds like they weren't filled even before the pandemic. Can you talk more about can you connect the dots for me, the correlation between having a full football stand on a Friday night and what that means for a sense of community in the city of Manassas?
Yeah, I think that our schools need a lot more support than just tax funding. They need parents and grandparents and neighbors and friends going and paying a few bucks to see the game that allows these sports teams to survive, right? It gives these kids a sense of community. They know that they're sitting here playing for their community. And then I also believe that that allows these coaches to feel supported, the teachers feel more supported, and it brings our community together. We start to see our friends and neighbors out and about at the same place. I'm a big proponent of this type of community engagement. I'm also a big proponent for all athletics for students, including GMBL. And I think that we have to have these conversations because when I was younger, the stadiums were packed. When my daughter was in school, the stadiums were packed. Our football team was going to state, right? We had a lot of things happening. But I don't care if our football team is losing every game. I want to be out there supporting them. I myself have to make that a better habit. I think we let our schedules get in the way, but with the commuting obligations changing, hopefully we can make more of those games.
And before we go here, I do want to point out that Potomac Local News has invited the slate of Democratic candidates who are also seeking seats on the city council, as well as the mayoral seat. We have two candidates, one Republican, Teresa Coates Ellis. We've mentioned her on this interview here, and Michelle Davis Younger, who is currently on this city council, along with Teresa Coates Ellis. They're both on the city council. And I will say that the Democrats have declined, have not taken an opportunity to come on and talk to us about their position. So it is very unfortunate they have not done that, but I do want our viewers to know that we have made every effort to talk with them. Lynn Forkel Green is, again, a candidate for the city council in Manassas. Thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today, and good luck in your campaign.
Thank you for the time and thank you for your coverage, and I wish you the best.